alleviation. Simply put, this means that microfinance can only develop within an enabling environment. In addition, once microfinance is developed, we can be able to deal with the problems associated with poverty.
Having benefited from a training which is part of the microfinance software consultancy with Nifty Solutions, Sukuta Visaka Kasia demonstrated some of the features of the software. As the world embraces computers and computerization in this digital age, and the Gambia being no exception, the issue for such microfinance institutions like the Sukuta Visaka may now perhaps not be ICT modernization, but surviving in the country's microfinance sector. Samuel Bach, GRTS.
Well, time now to take our first break. When we come back, we'll take a look at news from outside the Gambia. Stay tuned in.
Lucozade Energy, energizing Gambia.
Welcome back to GRTS News. Claims from the surviving suspect in the Boston Marathon bombings appear to suggest that the brothers may have acted alone. According to a U.S. government source, Johar Sanaya has told investigators that his older brother masterminded the deadly attack and the motivation was to defend Islam. As we hear in this report by CNN, life is turning into a semblance of normalcy for the first time since the deadly attack.
In his hospital bed, charged with the use of a weapon of mass destruction, he was read his rights, has a lawyer, and will be tried as any other citizen, not as an enemy combatant.
We have a long history here of successfully prosecuting terrorists and bringing them to justice. And the president fully believes that that process will work in this case.
Despite his injuries, including a bullet wound to the neck, sedated on a ventilator and restrained, Tsarnaev can still nod his head. The judge ruling he was alert and able to respond to the charges. When asked if he could afford a lawyer, Johar whispered, no. In the criminal complaint, investigators built a minute-by-minute account of the Tsarnaev brothers as they moved through the crowds at the marathon. At one point, Johar had his phone to his ear, maybe a ruse. Seconds later, the first bomb. Only then does he begin to walk away from the bag he's left amid the crowd. 10 seconds later, the second bomb is detonated. We are also learning about his older brother, Tamerlan Tsarnaev. In 2009, he was arrested for domestic assault after his girlfriend said he beat her up. Last year, he openly argued with a preacher at a mosque he sometimes attended, telling him that holiday celebrations were not allowed by Islam. Again, last January, he disrupted a sermon about Martin Luther King, calling the civil rights leader a non-believer. The revelations and charges, just as this city is struggling to recover, a moment of silence marking 1 week since the attack. From the Oval Office and around the country, a solemn tribute.
This is outside the Fashionable Hall here in Boston, typically a bustling area. Almost every spot in the city is silent and still.
Another step toward normal, Boylston Street turned over by federal investigators to the city of Boston. In a sign of the investigation's intensity, a tree, possibly touched by Johar, removed, taken as evidence, and photos of Johar withdrawing money from an ATM after a carjacking in the murder of MIT police officer Sean Collier. This as the victims continue to heal. 50 in the hospital, 2 still critical. For some seriously injured, hope.
Nearly all of the patients that have lost legs are already walking the halls with physical therapists.
Still, grim reminders here, just about everywhere. In Medford, the funeral for 29-year-old Crystal Campbell. The church overflowing, the grief unbearable.
A criminal investigation is underway to determine who is behind the car bombing at the French embassy in Libya. The explosion was so powerful it ripped the front wall of the embassy building and injured 2 French security guards and a 13-year-old girl who was in a nearby house. Libya's deputy prime minister said he has spoken to the French ambassador, and the French top diplomat has made it clear that he will not leave Libya. Jumana Karadesh has the latest from Tripoli.
Just left the scene a short while ago, headed to a government press conference to hear the latest from the Libyan government. This was definitely a very substantial blast, a major bombing that really affected homes in this very residential neighborhood of Tripoli. As you mentioned, it did blow the front wall of the embassy, caused severe damage to the embassy and also nearby homes. We've seen French investigators who seem to be in the lead in this investigation, collecting evidence from the scene of the blast. They're working alongside the Libyan criminal investigation, who have sealed off the scene and were collecting evidence who were there. People in the neighborhood told us that the blast happened just after 7 o'clock this morning, a massive blast that woke up people blocks away from the French embassy. Of course, people in the area, Christy, that's on the lax security here in Libya and the lack of accountability by the government here after many attacks that we have seen. But as you mentioned, this is the first major attack that we have seen take place in the capital, Tripoli, targeting Western interests.
You know, someone is exploiting this lack of security, but who? Who is responsible for this attack?
Well, Christy, a few months ago, as you remember, when the French intervention, the French military intervention in Mali, there was increased security here in Libya. There were concerns that Islamist extremist groups, some with ties to al-Qaeda, known to be operating in the eastern part of the country, also some of them taking, using the southern desert region of Libya for training camps and, logistical bases. That they could strike French interests here in Libya. We've also speaking to French embassy staff today saying that they were worried about this a few weeks ago, but no one expected this to happen right now. The people in the neighborhood they've spoken to also pointing the finger at al-Qaeda-linked groups.
Let's now take a quick look at the sports news. Manchester United Football Club is used to making history, and yes, this one is for the record books. The club became the first in England to win their 20th Premier League title to the delight of their fans. For more on these and other stories, we turn to CNN's Alex Thomas.
One of the great Manchester United football teams after the club became the first to win England's championship title for a 20th time. Fergie's men secured the Premier League crown in style at Old Trafford on Monday night. Wayne Rooney and Robin van Persie combining for one of the goals of the season. In a 3-0 thrashing of Aston Villa, Van Persie, signed from Arsenal last year, scored a hat-trick, taking his league tally for the season to 24. The victory sparked joyous celebrations among United fans. The club has a truly global following, all their supporters delighted to see the side bounce back from the pain in 2012 when they lost the title on the final day of the season on goal difference to local rivals Manchester City.
When he first got there, he had to knock Liverpool off their perch, as he famously said. And then once he got to the top himself, he had to keep fighting off contenders. You know, there's Arsenal, and there's Chelsea, now Manchester City. He can always bring in, he can always weave together a team with veterans and also with young players. He fosters young talent, and he can also bring in signings like Robin van Persie. It's one of the key things he's done throughout his career.
Bayern Munich.
And before we go, reminder of our top stories. The visiting CEO of Infini Africa Group, Nadine Khan, has said his group is set to establish a trade zone in the Gambia. This as he holds discussions with President Jammeh at the State House. The Vice President and Minister of Women's Affairs has held talks with the Chief Executive Officer and the Managing Director of EcoBank Group, currently on a business trip to the Gambia. Boston bombing suspect Johar Sanaya